that people look, where did you go? What did you get? And if you go, I didn't go to university, they're like, oof, I don't quite know what to do with you. So I think now, that is a very poor reason for society to be supporting, which it is doing because it's funding half the people at university because they're not paying the loans back. That's a societal investment at university so that we can kind of rank them. What we should be saying is, what's the knowledge and skills that these people, that our society absolutely needs? And we are not doing that at all. We're saying we're still shipping people off to do the same history, physics, whatever it is, without much consideration about what they should be learning. And Chris would actually say in the pitch, this is high risk, low return. Are you still interested?
Honesty.
Yeah.
I would never have thought.
And but they're like, no, keep going. And only one venture capital firm, which is Jam Jar, which is the guys that started Innocent Smoothies, Innocent Drinks. Okay. They started this venture capital firm called Jam Jar. They backed us, I think, because they're excited about changing education. And we had the founders of Funding Circle, another big business who's based near here, come. But back us, the family behind the H&M family backed us, and now we've got this business school. But it was hard, and in the end, it was families and family offices that were better because they have a very long-term view, and they don't care about the returns. They're thinking about generational investments for their children and their grandchildren.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ed. Emmanuel and I are really excited to talk about London Interdisciplinary School. It's a mouthful, so we're just going to consider it LIS.
That's fine by me.
Okay?
Yeah, that's what I do.
Cool. So why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to find LIS, and then we can dive into what makes it so unique.
Okay. Well, the thing I did before LAS was I started a school, a 4 to 18 school, or K-12 as Americans would call it. And opening that in East London in 2012, I quite quickly, with the two people that I was founding that with, started to feel really constrained by the narrowness that was, you're thinking these students are going to have to move from 9 to 9 subjects when they're 14 to then 3 subjects when they're 16. Then they're going to study one narrow thing at university, despite the fact that we were really trying with their education to broaden it out and create links between subjects. All of this was going to go away. And I was thinking, what is causing that? And realized that the way universities do their entrance exams, particularly in this country, has this huge narrowing effect on the education system. And actually, universities are very powerful. So if universities said, we want everyone to be a great salsa dancer before you come and study physics here, then every school in the country would start employing salsa dancers, and the parents would be on the phone going, what are you doing? What's your salsa program looking like? Right? And they are more powerful, universities' entrance, than any education secretary. So I thought, how do we change university entrance? And in the end, started to think, maybe the best thing is to start a new university with a very different kind of entrance. And then you start to think, well, what do we teach? And then you get to interdisciplinarity, because all of our degrees in this country are monodisciplinary.
So then talk us through what LAS does then. So I know that I think the headlines can talk about it not being, you don't go to get a specialty degree, you don't go to get a mathematics degree or an engineering degree. I think you did an engineering degree.
I did.
I'm correct.
Well, I remember.
If I remember that
We'll
correctly. We'll get into that.
Oh, well, that'll be fun.
Yeah. So just talk us through how LAS operates then.
So you're right. So most universities are organized around subjects, disciplines, like libraries, basically, are organized, social science corridor or social science department. We organize it completely differently. We organize the knowledge around complex problems. So problems that you have, problems like climate change, AI and ethics, problems that you get in kind of urban growth, problems around sustainability and so on, inequality. And we say, right, what are the disciplines you need to be able to tackle a problem like climate change? You need to be able to understand some science, potentially some mathematical modeling. You might need to understand some psychology. Why are we not responding, given that we know all the data? And we have, it's still very academically challenging. This is not just a sort of practical course where you kind of don't, it's intellectually challenging, it's cerebral. We have academics who are expert in data science, law, philosophy, but they are the ones teaching this problem of AI or whatever, right? So in that sense, it is much broader, but it's just as academically challenging. And at the end of it, you get a degree in interdisciplinary problems and methods, which is essentially you can grapple with these complex problems, and you can use different methods to tackle them.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of jobs do students then go for with that? I mean, I know we spoke when we first met about the internships and things like that go on through those years of university, but what kind of jobs would that pertain
Well,
to?
up until very recently, we were just guessing because we hadn't had any graduates.
Like any good startup, right?
So yeah, exactly. So we had a slide with what the jobs were going to be.
Yeah.
But now we know, our first cohort has graduated. A month after graduation, about half of them have got jobs, which is really, really good for the sector. Yeah,
that's how many students?
So about 60 graduated, just under 60 graduated, and so yeah, half of them are in skilled employment, so professional level jobs, and it ranges from NHS graduate scheme to Goldman Sachs to KPMG through to Greenworks and other kinds of startups in that sort of sector. The fast track for the Metropolitan Police, the equivalent of Teach First. Computer science. Someone's gone to work for a Liberal Democrat MP. Oh, wow. So it's pretty much. I think that's because he wants to legalize cannabis, personally. But anyway, that was. I was like, what is he doing?
It's a great mission he has.
No problem, no judgment. But he, and the interesting thing is that all of these institutions or people need help with thinking about some of these problems. And I think what I hope is that these graduates are bringing a skill set that is a little surprising or unusual, because they have, in their time with us, learned to code, learned to design surveys, learned to do ethnographic research, done statistical analysis, and so on through their 3 years. So they have this mix of methods which are really interdisciplinary. And I think that's pretty unusual.
Mm-hmm. No, we spoke about it before, Emmanuel. I mean, we're used to American universities where we do general education courses, and then we work our way up to this higher, specialty or focus. But it's not really integrated into one big problem like this is, but it's very similar in terms of you speak with someone who goes to a normal traditional UK university and they just study English, for example. They don't do mathematics and they don't do physics. So I guess my question is, how do you get students to want to do that? I mean, I feel like some people grow up being like, I'm going to be a scientist, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to be a doctor. And I know maybe you wouldn't go to get a PhD in an interdisciplinary school, but for being a doctor. Yeah. But right. So I guess what is it that makes students want to come and try this out, given that it's so new?
So first of all, you have a filter process, which is, have you always wanted to be a scientist and study chemistry for 3 years? Yes. This is not the right, then don't come to LIS, right? And we still need lawyers and doctors. And we don't need as many lawyers as we're actually training in this country, but we probably need more doctors. Well, the lawyers are massively underemployed coming out. It's one of the crummiest degrees to get. For employment stats are terrible for people who are graduating with law, which is not what people expect. It's the worst performing degree for being in high-skilled employment 6 months out, worse than things like in media or arts, which you think would have lower employment. Law has the lowest.
Oh, wow. Is that because it's so competitive?
It's to get jobs. Yeah, but it's a supply demand problem. We're simply graduating too many of them. We shouldn't be training as many, because people think it's a kind of nailed on safe job. And I think it's also a sector that's about to get disrupted, but that's not my specialist area. I think we don't know how many, but there's a lot of young people that want to specialize, and there's a lot of young people that don't. And at the minute in this country, they all have to specialize. So we're saying, and we're tiny, we're just looking for a number that want to continue. But I remember being like this personally when I was at school. I started off with my A-levels doing English as well as maths and physics. And I started off with too many A-levels, and so I dropped English in the end, which I really regret, because it was actually my favorite subject.
Mine too.
But it was yours as well?
Yeah, I love English.
Yeah, it's great. But you're getting good advice, I think, from the school at the time, which was, you've got to show whichever university that you're really passionate about the sciences or engineering. And so you don't really need English for that. And that's really, really sad, I think. So students kind of sheepishly come to us at open days and go, I'm doing a really weird set of A-levels, like I'm doing art and politics and physics. And you're like, that's so cool. Like, what's wrong with that? And they're like, oh, we've been told it's a bit weird. But we think that's exciting.
So, I mean, starting a traditional business is already hard enough. So, like, what's it like starting a university? And why would you decide to do that instead of just, like, starting, like a traditional business, an AI company, a retail business, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. So I suppose my starting point wasn't I wanted to start something. My starting point was I wanted to solve this problem of the kind of rigidness of the higher education system, the rigidness of universities. I've wanted to solve that problem. And I genuinely, for me personally, was looking at, could I go and work in a government job that could help try and shift how universities are doing admissions. Like that's one way to try and change the system. But I'd just gone through this process of starting a school, really loved it. I wasn't a teacher, so I didn't have a full-time role in the school after we opened it up. And I thought starting an institution was really fun. And so then I looked and thought, I wonder if there's going to be any regulatory changes that would mean that it's possible to start a university that I wanted, the kind that I would want to start. And with that Conservative government, it did look like that was likely. And in 2017, sure enough, there was a regulatory change. So it was more thinking, and so that's step one, is like, what do I want to do? What's the problem I'm trying to solve? What's the best way to do it? My next assumption was we'd start this as a charity. We'd start this as a sort of, like most universities are, kind of a not-for-profit charity. Had a meeting with the university's minister at the time, Sanjima, and said, is there going to be any money from government to help us with this? And they said no. And so I took the decision then that we were not going to be able to get enough philanthropic funding for this to make this happen. So we are a private institution. We have people backing us who in 100 years might get a return. But the fact is you can access 10 times as much capital if you're a sort of social enterprise, but you could return money to investors over time. And so we have many backers, including a very large French business school. And that's how I ended up. So I didn't start by saying, what's this company I want to start? What's the exit I'm looking for? What's the best way to get there? I was starting in a slightly different place. And then a university being a hard thing. I think there is such truism, and this is not my insight, but I think there's a truth to this. If you embark on something very, very difficult, and if you can get through that, then you're in a very strong place because it's hard for other people to copy it, to do what we did. It is very hard. The pain and the money and the risk that it took to get to where we are now is not going to be easy to replicate for others.
And you said that you weren't a teacher. So what were you doing after you got your university degree? You've graduated with an engineering degree. What did you do straight out of university?
I was building cities and bridges. No, I wasn't even really able to do that during the degree. If truth be told, I kind of plasticine and toothpicks. No, so wasn't the best. I mean, the reality of an engineering degree is it's mainly maths, and I was reasonably good at maths, but I reached my ceiling at university for sure. And a lot of the students that were coming from Malaysia and Singapore were just I'd never seen maths like it. So, but I was never going to be an engineer is the reality. I didn't love it. I was a theatre producer. I put on plays with a friend of mine. I met a friend who was at UCL at the time. I was at Imperial. He was doing English. And we started putting plays on together. And we continued to do that, sort of making money, like basically just about getting by, in all honesty, building up a bit of credit card debt. It was cheap credit at the time. It's the early 2000s.
Good old days.
The good old days, free money, yeah. And yes, I wish I'd understood that it still accumulates and that one day the 18% kicks in. But yeah, and so for 5 or 6 years, that's what we did. And then I did want to start. I had this idea of wanting to start a school, and he wanted to really stay in that sector. He wanted to be a writer, and we parted ways. We're still best friends, but he instantly overnight became this like success sensation. As soon as I turned right, he turned left, and he just like went into the
You were the black cat in his life.
I was basically the anchor on his success. Yeah, and he just unhooked me, and off the balloon went. So yeah, no, it was fun to watch. Genuinely fun to watch. But I mean, he's gone on to be nominated for an Oscar and write an Oscar-winning movie, and yeah, he wrote Bridge of Spies, the Tom Hanks movie, Still Work movie. So and he's great. He's go watch it. Go watch it. Hope he thanks me for that. But I went off I thought I'm going to have to make some money, partly to pay off these credit card debts, and partly because I'm going to need to start a business and make loads of money to start a school, right? That's what I thought I had to do. So I was going to do the step you talked about. And so I got a job at McKinsey, which was the only place that gave me an interview because I'd been putting on plays for 6 or 7 years. So I think it was genuinely, I know now it was someone's first week in the recruitment thing. And they just went, yeah, it looks exciting. And then by the next week, they'd just been going, bin. But this is and probably the engineering degree helped me get the interview, right? Yeah. And then I did well in the interviews, of course, and I got the job. But and I was there for 4 years, and I liked a lot about it. It wasn't always a happy time, but
what did you do at McKinsey?
I did I didn't specialize at all. I didn't have a long-term view about being there. So basically, they say to you, you have to narrow down to become a partner. I said, if I don't want to become a partner, can I just continue to choose maximum breadth? So I worked on 14 different sectors in the 4 years that I was there, from forensics to the NHS to financial services, mining, like everything, BBC. So it was really fun, mostly, and then sometimes just kind of pretty brutal. But I learned a lot, and I met a lot of great people. And it gave me a disproportionate amount of credibility when I came out to be able to say, now I want to start. So the government came in 2010 and said, we're going to do this free school policy. Michael Gove saying, you can start essentially what is called charter schools in the US. We're going to do that here. And I went, wow, that my whole plan to start a school has just got accelerated by 20 years. And because I'd been at McKinsey, and this is sort of crazy, people were like, "Yeah, you can probably start a school. You've done some PowerPoint slides." But straight away I met, and I got introduced through the McKinsey network. I got introduced to this guy Peter Hyman, who'd been in politics and was now a deputy head in a school, and had a similar vision of, we want to innovate. We don't want to just help disadvantaged kids get to college, which is a really important thing, but that wasn't what was getting us out of bed in the morning. We're like, it's kind of boring school and it's kind of narrow. What could it be? You're at school for 14 years. Is it good enough to just end with 3 grades and walk out and go, that's what this was all about? So we were just sort of united in a sense of what might be possible.
Do you think it was your engineering degree or anything you experienced throughout school itself that made you so passionate about wanting to change the system?
Yeah.
Or what do you think that passion came from?
The combination. So I was at a, we were saying earlier, you were at a tiny school, high school. I was at a, I think possibly smaller school in a village in the East Midlands, which was 300 people in the entire school from 4 to 18.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I can't relate.
So you can't relate. Yeah,
No,
exactly. So I think there was between 20 and 30 people in each year group.
Mm-hmm.
By 18, it was only 20. So that was wonderful in many, many ways, but it was also, again, it's quite limiting. Small school, rural area, very focused on exams, very good at getting good exam results, but there's not much outside it. Outside of it, I was doing, by some sort of a fluke, I got a part in a TV show when I was young, 9, 10 years old, where I turned into a dog, was what happened on the show, but that was that relevant. But it was sort of got this, and that was successful, and it ran for 5 or 6 years, but then I was coming back to this tiny school, and I was starting to get this idea of what maybe people were missing out on, this other kind of experience you could have as a kid. So I thought, well, maybe you could bring some of that into a school somehow. So that's that. That's for the sort of school bit of it. And then, for the undergrads, I didn't love my time at Imperial. I thought the teaching standards were not good. Obviously, the research is world class. We were not well taught. There was a kind of macho attitude to, so many of you are going to fail because it's really hard. Afterwards, I was like, wait a minute, what about if you get better at teaching? Like, maybe that's going to help those numbers. But they didn't occur to them. They're like, 30% of you will fail. Go for it. Inspirational speech.
Like a coaching thing or something. People tell people before they go on the field.
It's like that, like a pep talk.
Why don't you try helping this 30%?
Yeah, you're a teacher, right?
Is that me or you?
Yeah, and too many, I think, because it was a world-class research institution, too many saw themselves as researchers rather than teachers.
I mean, I had a similar experience. I did computer science and technology for my bachelor's, and I hated it after like my first semester, basically.
Right.
But I pushed through.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself in a similar situation where one semester in, you're like, what am I doing here? But you just just push through it.
100%.
Now you're just kind of stuck doing it.
I was initially on a master's, which is 4 years at NMEng, but then I phoned up immediately and said, can I change this to a BEng? But I wish I'd had the sort of kind of advice or the strength of mind to just change degree. I would have probably had to change to a different university because Imperial's just the sciences, and I really probably should have done something like philosophy or English. But as I say, look, I may not have got the job at Imperial without the kind of impressive mechanical engineering degree, and I'm sure you found it sort of being able to say, I got a computer science degree. Yeah. That has kudos, right? And even if you found it a drag, so it has other benefits.
That's kind of what, made me kind of push through. I know this is kind of like a degree that people look at it and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, And it could open up many opportunities, whether or not you want to stay in computer science or go into business.
If you want to go and raise money, in your pitch deck saying I did computer science to a VC is much better than I did.
It looks better than liberal arts.
Exactly, indeed. Don't
sure.
knock the liberal arts, but yeah, you're right.
Emmanuel and I have also, oddly interviewed so many people that are successful entrepreneurs and they've dropped out of school. And we've caught ourselves so many times questioning why we did 2 degrees when these people are making so much money and doing that. So I think,
it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, do you think a university degree is crucial nowadays, or do you think it's almost as risky as not having one? It's not cheap.
It's not cheap. I don't think in this country it's a bad deal. I mean, and that's not that popular a view, but I think it's half of people don't pay pay it back. So it's a reasonably progressive way of thinking about it. You only pay back when you're earning a certain amount. It totals up to about 45K with all the maintenance fees. I don't think that's too bad.
Better than the US.
I think it's better than some of the US universities, but it's not perfect, that's for sure. I think the reality is we get quite a few mature, in inverted commas, undergrads who are sort of 22, 23 years old, who didn't go to university when they're 18 and have started to get work, and actually now they're finding it's a ceiling. So they're trying to apply to better jobs. They might be working in retail or something. They might be a manager in a retail setting, but they want to go towards professional services or something like that, and they need an undergraduate degree. Now that may be changing, but it is still a reality in our society that people look, where did you go? What did you get? And if you go, I didn't go to university, they're like, oof, I don't quite know what to do with you. So I think now that is a very poor reason for society to be supporting, which it is doing because it's funding half the people at university because they're not paying the loans back. That's a societal investment at university so that we can kind of rank them. What we should be saying is, what's the knowledge and skills that these people, that our society absolutely needs? And we are not doing that at all. We're saying we're still shipping people off to do the same, history, physics, whatever it is, without much consideration about what they should be learning. And all the debate is, what should the fees be? And how do we get more diverse groups of students? Those are two very important questions. But if what's happening in the 3 years is not interrogated properly, then what's the point of arguing the toss on the fees and who's going?
Mm. No, it's really interesting because I went to a quite well-known graduate school. And I thought, I spent all this money. I did this whole year of it. It's going to go on the top of my resume, on my CV.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's like, no, put your work experience first and your degree last, because that might just be a tick box, like that you need a grad degree. And it was kind of like a gutting feeling. So I was like, what do you mean? I just paid for this.
Yes.
But yeah, it comes down to those internships and what you've learned, or your projects or your dissertation and things like that you can really talk about.
What did you do in
uni
rather than
and I'm sure that's
degree
something
itself.
you see with your students as well, as being a new university. Your name might not stand out as much as Oxford University. So I guess
Not yet. Give us 900 years.
900 years, yeah, okay. So yeah, how do your students kind of get around that?
To some extent, so there's lots of employers who are a little bit unnerved by the fact they've not heard of us. But there's some employers that are really excited about it and give the students a lot of kudos because they see the students' grades from school, and often they've got 3 A's, and they could have gone to a famous university and they chose to come to us. So that is giving the employers a little bit of like, oh, pause for thought. These are interesting young people who have chosen to do something different. I think the reality is, if you go to a Russell Group university now, 88% of people get a first or a 2-1. So we have 150, 200,000 people graduating every year from universities, getting a 2-1 or a first, and it's very hard for employers to differentiate them. So to your point, what's the point of putting that at the top? Because that's just, everyone's going to have that. Mm-hmm. So then you need to differentiate on internships or projects, and that's where we invest a lot of time and effort into trying to get interesting internships. And our every year in the third term, a student is working on a complex problem that they've chosen, so they're all unique, and they're building a portfolio of work that they can show to employers. And I think for me, it's a filter. The employers that are excited by our students were probably more exciting to work for than the employers. But I said earlier they're working for, we're getting jobs at KPMG and Goldman Sachs. So these sort of stuffy, old-fashioned companies are not screening them out. So NHS, who you thought might be more conservative, they're opening their doors. But sometimes we're literally not on the drop-down menu when people are saying which university did you go to, right? They happen to put other. Mm-hmm. But that'll change.
In 900 years.
In 900 years, that'll change. The drop-down, we'll get that fixed.
Yeah. Well, the thing is it's an interesting perspective because, higher education is such a traditional thing, and it's been around for centuries and centuries and centuries. Yeah. And so nobody that we would traditionally interview with a startup would say that. They wouldn't say, I'm going to be big in 900 years because they're going to be long gone by then. So I guess, what is that like, having such a long road ahead to, keep up with these higher education institutions?
So our biggest challenge is the reality of the UK, and I don't know, it's probably similar in the US, although the UK has this uniquely long higher education history as well. So I guess Italy does, but is that prestige is pretty directly correlated with how old they are. Mm-hmm. Right, so prestige is correlated with age, which makes it very hard for a startup to come in and steal their lunch. Mm-hmm. So this is not a kind of Uber comes in and steals the market type market. This is a market where the biggest currency is prestige, and prestige is directly correlated with age. So how the hell do you have a new entrant? So and you're dealing with the biggest brand, the oldest brands in the world. Not necessarily the biggest, but they are definitely the old. Oxford University is probably the oldest brand in the world. I don't know an older one. I mean, like Guinness is old. I guess the Catholic Church. But so this is a challenge. And so what we've been trying to do is establish ourselves as a challenger to these Russell Group universities and trying to establish some prestige. And we're doing a pretty good job so far, but it's a fragile thing. So what we're optimizing for is definitely not like get to break even, all the sorts of things you might be trying to optimize for. It is, if we can crack this nut of creating something which is attracting people away from Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, King's, St Andrews, which is what we're doing. I don't know how many people we've attracted away from Oxford. You have an offer, but we've definitely attracted people from all those other institutions, and we've had people who've dropped out of Oxford to come to us. We've got a master's program where people's undergrads, about 30% of people did their undergrad at Oxbridge are now doing masters with us. So there's something where we have faculty who have joined us from Berkeley and Harvard, as well as the top places. And so we're trying our best, and we're kind of on the way, and we're working with some top organizations. And I like to think we can crack it, but we can't race to the answer here. We have to take our time. And our backers, the ones that are my favorite backers, have a 50-year time horizon, genuinely. And these are typically family offices. These are not 5 to 7 year return VC funds, right? That just simply wouldn't work. We can't return it to them. But if you can get that right, if you can create something which is has a prestige in London, in the UK, with our own degree awarding powers, that's the way to create something. If you're interested in maximizing value, then it's hard to put a price on that, because there are not many prestigious UK education institutions that you could buy or invest in or sell, right? That's just, they're not for sale. But it's a long-term view, and you have to constantly be communicating to the board, to your backers. This is a long-term thing. We need this thing to be around in 30, 40 years.
How was it like, getting your backers to invest into LIS? Like, what was the process like?
Well, we would go
pitch deck like.
Yeah, what was the pitch deck like? Yeah, it's that classic thing, to start off with. It's me and this guy Chris, who's my co-founder, who's a little older than me, not much, and he'd been a tech entrepreneur. He'd started Booker Table, which is now Fork, the like Open Table, which was a success. He'd had some businesses that hadn't worked, he'd raised money lots of times. I'd never raised VC type money. We for the first round, probably met with 30, 40 venture capital types. We knew the venture capitalists would not be that interested, because there's no hockey stick growth curve in our deck. And Chris would actually say in the pitch, "This is high risk, low return. Are you still interested?"
Honesty.
Yeah.
I would never have thought.
Yeah. Wow. But they're like, "No, keep going. And only one venture capital firm, which is Jam Jar, which is the guys that started Innocent Smoothies, Innocent Drinks. Okay. They started this venture capital firm called Jam Jar, and they invest typically in FMCG type businesses like Deliveroo and Wild, the deodorant company. But they backed us, I think, because they're excited about changing education. And we had the founders of Funding Circle, another big business who's based near here, come back us. The family behind the H&M family backed us, and now we've got this business school. But it was hard, and in the end, it was families and family offices that were better, because they have a very long-term view, and they don't care about the returns. They're thinking about generational investments for their children and their grandchildren. And I think they think, if you could create this new university and we own 5-10% of it, that's kind of cool. Right? That could turn out to be a fantastic investment.
So after getting this investment, you and your co-founder successfully convinced people to, for some reason, give you the money to start this university.
Yeah.
What was it then like? Like, what was the next step in your trajectory? Like, when you both sat down and said, "Okay, we have the money now. How are we going to do this?"
So first step was definitely the money. Can we get the first 300,000, something like that, just to get going, to start employing 1 or 2 people? Then it was regulation. So we wanted to get degree awarding powers, and no other new institution, no other university had opened with its own degree awarding powers since the 1960s. So since Warwick University and the Open University, since that little wave, everyone had been babysat by another university for 7 or 8 years. But we wanted the regulation had changed back to that regulation point in 2017, and so we had to go after that. And that was hard. And that was, we wrote an application which had 1.5 million words in it, I think. And it was backwards and forwards. And we failed the first time and had to delay a year. And so those two sentences contain a lot of pain and a lot of heartache.
1.5 million words, did you write it?
Yeah, I didn't write it. We
Okay.
had 3 fantastic members of the team that wrote that. But we had gone out and recruited students in the expectation that we would get it. And then we'd had 700 applications. Then we had to contact all 700 students individually and say, we're going to delay you. We're really sorry. So that was a tough moment. But you've got 2 other big challenges to your question about what comes next. So there's regulation. How do you build a brand, which we talked about, like a challenger university brand? How do you get applications? How do you convince young people not to go to Bristol? All that thing you've thought about when going through school, I'm going to go to this kind of university or that kind of university. No, you're not. You're going to come and join 50, 60 other people in this tiny campus in East London with this thing that may not work. Right, that's what you're going to do, and I bet you hadn't thought about that. so there's that, and then that's hard. That is a hard job and remains a hard job to this day, particularly for undergrads. It's such a big decision for them. Master students get it and they're coming in their droves, but undergrads, it's a big deal. And then how do you recruit good academics? And I had a prejudice that academics would just be really stuffy, non-entrepreneurial, not get it, not want to come. But there's a lot of academics out there who are frustrated with the current system. They don't like the idea they have to publish papers all the time or they don't get promoted. And they wanted to have their fingerprints on building a new university. So we got something like 700 applications for the first 8 jobs that we put out. And that was 10x more than we thought we would get. So we had to elongate the process. And we have, that was the only bit of it that was significantly easier than I thought it was going to be.
In terms of outreach and trying to recruit students, do you find yourselves marketing more towards the parents or to the students? Which one do you think has more of a grounds for persuasion when you're going to school? Because if you think about it, the student's not paying half the time. So.
No, that's true. That's a good point. I can give you an example on this. So recently we had a nice article, 4-page article in the Sunday Telegraph or Saturday Telegraph magazine. And that was mostly parents age that were reading that. And we had a bumper open day shortly afterwards where loads of people came. And for the first time, I got the vibe that there were parents there on the whole that were more excited about LAS than the young people, right? And that is the wrong way round, fundamentally. So what you want to have, our more usual thing is a student comes, they're really enthusiastic, they bring their cynical parent, or their like skeptical parent, or just their parent that wants to make sure this thing's a real deal. Like, that you're going to take my child for 3 years in this high stakes move. They really want to come, but are you the real deal? And they come, and then usually by the end of the day, we've got them excited and reassured them and spent a lot of time talking to them. I don't really want to do that the other way around. I don't want to try and convince a young person that they should come here for 3 years, because it's a different thing. Your heart should be on fire about coming to somewhere, whereas the parents more need reassurance, and I think that's easier to do post. So you want the student driving it. So we advertise to students. We're trying to get the students excited emotionally, but the best performing channel for us is word of mouth, and I think a lot of that comes from press, whether it's City AM or other newspapers, and people going, "Hey, I saw this. What do you reckon? Maybe this is for you," and that helps because it kind of gives us a credibility and a kudos. Newspapers still have this crazy ability for people to think, "Oh, it's real. It's been in the newspaper." That makes it a real thing. So, that's helpful. Yeah, it's true. They do. I mean, it's really helpful.
And what was it like? What's the difference like starting a university versus starting, the K-12 that you ran prior to this?
There's a lot of differences, but there was a fair bit of pattern recognition as well. And I don't think I could have done this without having done the school beforehand, because I was learning a lot from my co-founder in that, is Peter guy, who'd been a deputy head, who took over as the head teacher. In the end, he was the one running it and driving it. But there's a couple of differences. One is that was we didn't have to do any marketing or recruitment, but your intake is young people in Newham, in Stratford, which is one of the more disadvantaged parts of London, brilliantly diverse. So it's the most diverse borough in the country, but one of the poorest. So it's not very diverse economically. So that comes with certain challenges. And they are coming because they live nearby. So that's good and bad. It means it's easy to market because they just come, especially when we got the outstanding Ofsted. But it means they don't necessarily want to be there. So you have other challenges. And we're trying to give this progressive curriculum. You're more tightly regulated. So Ofsted is this sort of terrifying thing that's hovering over you all the time. and you don't get to choose what exams they sit. So you're constrained ultimately on the educational model. But we also didn't have to raise money for that. We got government money. We got 15 million from the government to renovate the building. We got money in the sort of startup money, and then you get money that follows the pupil if you can attract pupils. So there were some bits which were simpler, and there were some more complexities because of the context. Whereas here, we have students who all want to be there. They're highly motivated. They're all plus 18. So there's a lot of difficulties that go away that you have with young children or considerations. But you have to raise money and you have to market, and that was both new to me, so that was really challenging. And it's a hard thing to raise money for, and it's a very hard thing to market.
Do you find yourself like interacting with any of the students currently right now?
From now at the university?
Yeah, now at the university.
Oh yeah, a lot. I mean, we have essentially an open plan campus, so no academics. No one has yes, Jane's been and seen, and there's no one's got an office. So I don't have an office. So a student wants to, they can. Interestingly, no student's chosen to do this, but a student could sit opposite me and work opposite me during the day. But no, yesterday we had a town hall, which we do every term, where all of the student body across all our programs, there's only 2 or 3 programs, come. I go, our dean goes, and some of the other faculty go, and we sort of go, right, what's working, what's not working, and that is another way of having interactions. But, sometimes we play football against them. Sometimes I'll go and sit in the back of the class. But we're essentially sharing an office, right? That's kind of how it feels, because the campus used to be a shared workspace. It's kind of modern space for 200 people. And so it has that kind of vibe that we're all in this together. So you'll be making tea and coffee next to them, which is from a business perspective, if you look at it from a business rather than a university, it is very peculiar to be interacting with your clients or your customers on a daily basis. And I struggled with this. So the moment we opened and in come the customers, right, on day one, you then get all this noise which you're desperately trying to respond to. So someone's going, this isn't working, that's not working, this wasn't very good, that wasn't very good. And it's all these like anecdotal bits of feedback, which if you try to react to them all, you go mad. And so we were trying to figure out what's the signal that we should be trying to look for in all of this noise. And that took me personally, I struggled with that for probably the best part of a year. Because you get so stressed that that's why the town hall's great, because then you go, I had 3 people say they hated, the way that the coding was being taught, and then everyone else in the room goes, no, we love it. And go, okay.
Talk it out.
Glad I didn't change it.
Yeah. But it's really interesting. It's like a staff meeting.
You're immersed. Yeah. You're immersed in them. Yeah, it is like a staff meeting, but you're immersed in them in the daytime, and that is unusual.
And what have you learned, from the town halls, like what has been working, and what's what you can improve on, what you can change, what you should definitely keep the same?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's lots that we've kept the same. We found the way we taught mathematical, so quantitative subjects, so data science or coding or statistics, that was a challenge because we have people coming in to do our program who might have gone to do computer science at Imperial, or they've turned down a fine art course at the Slade School for Arts, right? And they're on the same degree, both in the same coding class, and they're very different mathematical capabilities. So we weren't getting that right in the first year. We've fixed that now, but that's something that we discussed a lot in town halls. Yesterday, something we talked about in town halls is how we mark sort of what should count towards the degree and what shouldn't, right? So which bits of work should count and which shouldn't. And we've moved to more of a program where more work counts, and we think that's good because it gets people to kind of do their prep work and hand work in, and it should be low stakes, but it does count towards your degree. Whereas some students were saying yesterday, we're finding this really stressful. Every week we're doing something that counts towards our degree, and even if we just get a little mark out of 5, it's really stressful for us if we get a 2 or a 3 versus a 4 or 5, right? Mm-hmm. And then you get into a big discussion, and that's really important for them. But we're also learning in reality about how to build this university, because none of us have built a university before. So, and actually when we say to the students what I've just said, and be honest with them, but we're trying our best, and they get it, and they feel a sense of building this with us, I think.
Do you have a favorite student?
No. Yes. Everyone's got a favorite student, Emmanuel. Everyone's got a favorite student, and no one divulges who it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Do the alumni work closely with the incoming students at all? I'm assuming that's going to be a really big part of. Yeah,
they're doing some what we call coaching, and they're doing some facilitation of some groups and some, because they get the program. There's not many people that understand our program, right? So our alumni do, but we're new in the alumni game, so we're still figuring it out. And mainly we want them to go off, get fantastic jobs or fantastic master's places or go traveling or whatever.
And then they're busy.
Yeah, exactly. And then they'll be too busy.
And speaking of busy, as an entrepreneur, I'm sure, you're busy. You're probably working, 24/7. How is it that you manage your time, and what do you do when you're not at the university?
So I would say my hours are not crazy, but I'm sort of always on or thinking about stuff, and that's not great. So my hours, honestly, are probably 9 to 6, sort of perfectly normal working hours. I'm not working till, and I think that is because I've had some experience of starting things before, and I think if this was my first thing, I feel like coming to this as a second or third major project. Remember the theatre days, it's like constant startup. You're putting on a show in your 20s, that's like a startup in itself, and then you do it again and again. So I feel this muscle is reasonably well developed, and I can see what I can deprioritize and what needs to be prioritized. So the startup was not this sort of hugely intense, literal 24/7 experience. Doesn't mean it wasn't stressful, but I think for me, I have a reasonably good work-life balance in terms of hours. I don't think I have a great, and my partner she'd say, you're constantly thinking about work. I go, I don't work that hard. And she's like, yeah. When are you not thinking about it? And that's a tricky one. I try to switch off, and for my mental health, I do a fair bit of sport. I play football and keep fit, and then I'm getting back in. I'm 46 years old, so I play at the back. is where I play. I've been played there for a while, to be fair. No, I love that. 8-a-side in East London on a Saturday. But and then I'm trying to draw more. I think that's really great for my mental health. It's not something I've really done before. And so I'm doing a bunch of YouTube kind of videos trying to learn how to do that. And it's tailed off a bit, but in recent decade, trying to read like a lot more than I had before in terms of actual books. So I'm not really on social media. And for a few years, I was reading about 40, 45 books. This year, I'll probably read 15 or something, which is still not bad, but like sit down, get through the entire book. But when I was reading 40, 45 books, I was feeling like my brain was just getting so much food, and I was just so much better for it. And I was trying to do some practices like write up the book as soon as I'd finished it. At the end of the year, write up a synthesis of all the books I'd read that year. And it was actually terrifying how much I'd forgotten of a book immediately after finishing it, then trying to write up the notes that I'd got inside it. I was like, my God, I'd forgotten that note I'd written. I'd even forgotten that. So what about all the stuff I didn't make a note about?
It's like you're trying to replicate the English degree you didn't do.
Maybe. That's
like
actually, that might be right. Maybe if I'd done that's it. I'm definitely not doing maths in my spare time.
Yeah,
I'm not doing any thermodynamics.
Solving calculus
equations.
That's not happening.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a natural progression of doing that. But that's good because you don't, if you're reading 40, I'm assuming that's a year.
Yeah. But I'm not. The last couple of years, I've not managed that. But that's where I was at. Yeah.
I mean, Emmanuel and I both love books. I'm gonna go ahead and assume you don't read 40 to 45 books a year.
No, I might get through like.
But that is
4.
a lot. You would definitely easily forget about them if you did.
But we read a lot of. You did read a lot, yeah. But we read a lot of things because of different forms of reading, and I'm not sure that the book is necessarily the best form to read something, right? It might be a paper or a blog, or that might be better, or listening to a podcast.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I read a lot of news articles.
Yeah. For work.
Of course, yeah. You can't help it.
What is that like you miss, like, being a student? What was like, I don't know, I look back sometimes a lot of things I do miss about being a student. Like, what was that like for you? Like, what is that you would say you miss?
I think I didn't love, as I said, the degree. I honestly, this is a little sad for me. I don't think I miss very much about my mechanical engineering degree. Really, I don't think there were many days where I was just sort of thinking, wow, God, I love this fluid mechanics. That fluid mechanics lesson was one of the better ones, right? It was just, but I did do a lot of theatre at university. I put plays on, and that was kind of thrilling and really fun. And when the stakes are not, if the stakes feel high at the time, but you kind of know they're not that high, and so that is just brilliant. And the complete freedom of let's just, what are we going to do this afternoon? We can do literally anything, and we're in London. That of course is great as a student, but like all stages in life, you look back and go, oh, I didn't really appreciate that. And I'm trying to figure out what I'm not appreciating now, and I'm just not quite sure what it is. But I'm
sure you're going to remember on the way
sure
back home.
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think, I mean, going to an American university is obviously drastically different than going here. I mean, the football games were, American football games, just crazy, and the house parties and things like that, and all those, that culture, definitely different from the UK, but also being at, you know, the LIS and a smaller, like, you guys don't have football games or.
Right.
But I don't know how many, I can't compare it to UK at university as an undergrad, but is there anything that you do to kind of make sure that that interaction between students keeps going? Like those, you know, I don't know, homecoming or little things like that where people are actually hanging out with each other. If they don't get that traditional experience.
Well, we have to create traditions.
Yeah.
So, and so we start the whole experience that when people join in a sort of somewhat ritualist, in a somewhat of a ritual of kind of greeting and meeting each other. Because traditions that people just take for granted now in these old places started as someone doing something a bit weird, right? I mean, saying, we're all going to wear this weird outfit and we're going to walk over here for no reason, and then this person's going to tap us on the head or something, right? And the first time someone does that, surely someone was going, why can't we just chill out and just say hello to each other? And so, but rituals I think are really important. And rituals don't have to be old. You can invent them. So that's what we've done a bit. So there's rituals, which we do at the beginning, you know, mark the beginning and end, and rites of passage. And we did a graduation that was sort of, I would say, 50% traditional, 50% a little bit different. And that was a magical thing. And actually the ritual, the old part of it that we borrowed, people had gowns and, you know, mortarboards, and they were handed degrees. This was really important, actually, to root it. Whereas if you said to me 5 years ago, is that what we're going to have? And I thought, boring, we want to change all of that. But it was really important to root it in the history, which is a great history of universities. But we also have to make sure they're meeting people and having fun. I mean, they live in shared halls. They can join societies from other universities. If they want to be in a play at LIS, you know, there's 150 students. There's probably not going to be enough to put on Mamma Mia or something. You're going to have to go and do that in another university. So they're doing that. But actually, there's the law of sort of the Dunbar's number of 150, which is that you struggle to get a community above 150, but you can actually know everyone in a community of 150, means they sort of know everybody in this student body of 150. And I definitely can't say I have 150 friends from university. So you go to a much bigger place and you can end up with far fewer connections, I think.
I actually do agree. It's like when you live in a big city, you realize it's so much harder to make friends because of no one cares about you're just like your slice of a huge pie compared to when you're in a small, 2,000.
Yeah.
I didn't know 2,000 people, but you knew 2,000 people in your town, Jenny.
Exactly.
I didn't know 2,000 people ever at any point in my life.
There's no animosity whatsoever.
So that is very true. That we, it's like, what's that saying where big parties are not intimate, or something like that.
Yeah, and it also goes, I guess, to show later on in your life with those connections. I mean, if you have a small class or a small university, you might not be very close with everybody, but you're acquainted with them, and I think that goes far when you go into certain professions and sectors and industries and things like that. I might know Brenda, but we're not close, but we can, we have that connection where we can say hello, hi, we went to the same university.
I think that's important. I mean, I still have that with my McKinsey connections now, where I met somebody recently, and the reality is, because we were sort of interested in what each other were doing, we'd never spoken at university. None of us really said it, but we'd never spoken at McKinsey in 4 years, but we knew who each other were. And I think that's but if in a big place, that's less likely.
Well, it's like I went to City University for my grad degree, and when I came here, everybody else went to City University, and I was like, okay, well, it's nice to have that connection, but now you're not unique in any way whatsoever. And you might have all gone there, but you don't know them or of them. So it's it's an interesting perspective for sure. Yeah,
I pretty much only knew people either like people who were doing the same degree as me, or they were like in the university. Like I was in my university football team. So that was pretty much it. Those are my friends, people in my class and the school, like the school team. And that was pretty much it. I didn't know as many people as 60 people, probably. Which I think is actually, a testimony to how easy it is to make friends and real connections when it is a smaller crowd. Do you feel like eventually that will become, it will grow, you will have 5,000, 10,000 plus people?
Or more campuses?
That's the idea. Maybe more campuses, maybe internationally. Certainly we want to grow. We need to be a bit bigger to be sustainable, right? Because we're still backed by external money. But as it grows, you will start to see the community fracture a little bit. It'll just be what happens. I mean, it's interesting. There's another slight paradox of a very small community like we have. And because everybody's friends with everybody, I think people have the most diverse friend set that they'll ever have. Whereas when you get bigger and bigger and bigger, people tend to gravitate towards people that are a bit like them. So the biggest example of that is Twitter, where basically people are just sort of connected to or watching people in these echo chambers that are just like them. Whereas in this small space, you've got people with completely different backgrounds who know each other because it's such small groups. And I think that's a positive thing. As we grow, maybe we can try and still bake that in. I think that's just a law of the human scale nature of what we're dealing with at the minute. And as we get bigger, it'll be harder. But there may be ways of doing it.
Do you have any advice for any, future entrepreneurs that might be listening to this podcast?
Starting a business or a university.
Yeah, maybe not starting a university. That's quite a specific one. I think really hard and then come and talk to me if you're thinking about doing this university. But my main one that I think is not always a piece of advice that people might give, and is to think long term and to be moving towards something think about what you can do in 7 or 8 years rather than 1 or 2. So in my case, that was, I want to start a school. I'm going to go and earn some money at McKinsey, then maybe start a business, then maybe sell that business, then I'll have money and I can start a school, right? So I had like a 10, 15-year plan. But I started thinking about it in around 2004, 5, and then it opened in 2012. So that is slow. I started thinking about the university around about 2011, even before we'd opened. We opened in 2021. So now saying to somebody I'm going to start a university sounds sort of comical, like how are you going to do that? But if you go, well, it's going to take you 7 years to do it, people start to go, oh, okay, well. And then just make sure you're sailing and tacking in roughly the right direction. And then you'll have to retack and rechange. But a lot of people say you've got to move fast and break things. That's just not really been the way I've worked. I've worked slowly, long-term goals, but in the end, you can do, things that are meaningful.
Is there anything that you would change if you could go back and, do it all over again?
Yeah, I mean, there's like 1,000 sort of trivial things that I would definitely change. Certain hiring decisions. I mean, in the end, hiring decisions are really, really important, and you just have to accept that you're going to make some mistakes. I think on succession, we didn't quite get right for the school. Succession's really hard. So the founder who's going to run the thing, we sort of got that half right, half wrong. I really want to get that right here. So for LAS, so at some point I'll move on and our dean will move on, and I want to make sure we have the right succession. So that's something I'm thinking about. And
I guess what I would want to know is just basically, where do you see LIS in the next, 10 years?
900.
100 years. Yeah, hopefully still here in 100. Really nice. 900. I mean, look, what do I want? I want this sort of LAS. In LAS, I want it to be this thriving institution where all kinds of different people are coming and thinking about these complicated problems, and no one's saying, I don't do maths and I'm this kind of person, or I'm only that. They're just interested in ideas, and they're bringing ideas from a range of places, and it's the sort of place you can walk through the building and just feel that kind of energy. And that's quite a touchy-feely description of it. But then outside of LAS, I want the impact of us to be that people are talking about interdisciplinarity, or rather, if they're not talking about that, they're talking about we need multiple perspectives on this problem. So, when a problem like COVID comes along again, you've got some people in the room who are scientists and who are politicians, but you've got some people in the room who really deeply understand both those perspectives. And I think that's what we're missing. We're missing people who understood exponential growth rates, kind of how viruses work, as well as some legal and psychological stuff. So who were the people that understood all of that to some extent, right? Not deep expert, who could be the glue in those conversations. So I want more of those people in the world, and the conversation to be much more about, we need an interdisciplinary approach to these problems.
It's like some of the, best CEOs and best entrepreneurs, founders, they can sit at a table with their marketing department. They can sit at a table with their editorial department. They can sit at a table with their any department within their business and understand it enough to be able to direct that department. Yeah. So it's almost like that's who's going to be leading businesses ultimately. If you're just, a master of one thing, how can you, I guess, manage so many different types of teams? I think that's right. And we're looking at now launching a new version of an MBA. Mm-hmm. I think we've mentioned this to you before. And the question there is like, what does the future leader need? And in our view,
they need to be able to understand things like technology, how intelligence is going to evolve, artificial and human, the energy transition. They need to be able to understand trust in institutions. They need to be able to understand the increasingly complex world we live in. And they need to do that at a level that is beyond just listening to a podcast or having read a blog about it. So they need to understand fundamentally some of the academic underpinnings of those things. So for me, those are the leadership programs of the future, is leaders in, you want the person leading your organization, particularly if it's a large one, to be able to grasp the shifting terrain of the world. That is really important, because what's going on in the world affects organizations more than it ever did before.
And would you say it's been really, helpful having a co-founder, because there's always that debate, co-founder, no co-founder. What would you say?
There's no question you've got to have a co-founder. I have to have a co-founder. It's too lonely and too hard. It's just too hard. So the simplest thing is, other than the fact that no one's got the complete skill set, I mean, even two people don't cover the whole set of skills you need, right? You need to build a team. But the mood swings in those early days of this isn't going to happen are serious. So you'll be lying in bed at 3 a.m. going, what am I doing? I'm going to run out of money. I've got this was preposterous anyway. The last 8 people have told me how crazy this idea is, and it's not even a good idea. Whereas you then phone your founder the next day and they're buzzing and they're positive about something, even when you later discover that they'd had the same sleepless night, right? But you tend to show up for each other and you just get each other through. And if you can see they're down, you pick them up, vice versa. I don't know how I'd have done this on my own. I wouldn't have been able to. So for me, it's quite straightforward. And this whole thing of like splitting equity or whatever, or falling out, there's a risk of falling out, and I just wouldn't care about the equity thing. Just, just build something that you want to build that's exciting, and don't want you to share generously.
We just got our clip.
On that note, I think that's all that we had to cover for the day. But is there anything else that you wanted to touch on?
No, I've enjoyed it. It's a great conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ed.
Yeah,
It was great having you.
Yeah, I loved it. Thanks very much.